And I think for us, like when we think about kind of how do you eliminate fraud within the space, to me, it's hard to say, oh, we don't want to be the arbiter of, okay, this is fraudulent, this is not fraudulent. What we want to do is kind of inform our drivers and say, well, if you're booking a load, hey, heads up, here's a flag that we just saw the same exact load, the same amount of pounds, like the same amount of time to post, whatever it is, within the same lane, right? So kind of educate the customers and say like, hey, this might be suspicious, heads up, right? And I think those are kind of the tools that we're thinking about building to just make sure to give the driver the most informed decision when they're going about their business.
Hey, Dan, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and exactly what you do and what you got going on?
Cool. So good to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on. Dan, CEO at TruckSmarter. What we do at TruckSmarter, our mission is to empower truck drivers' lives. The way we do that is primarily through an ecosystem of products that effectively help drivers find jobs, get paid faster, find cheaper discounts, and effectively run and manage their businesses much more efficiently. I think what got us excited about this was, a lot of my time spent within the freight brokerage world at Uber Freight and kind of seeing just how technology has progressed to date, and just seeing how, even though there's been a lot of great innovation in the space within freight, for truck drivers, for owners out there, for even small size, mid-sized fleets, a lot of technology just hasn't caught up. To the point where there's thousands of different tools for drivers to just even find their next job, another set of hundreds of tools to help get paid faster, another set of dozens of tools to kind of find those good fuel discounts. So our mission is to just make that far more simple for drivers to just get back on the road and continue to move this economy, which, I think what gets me super excited about this space is just that this is the heartbeat of our economy. And I think it's seeing that each and every single day within our customer base is always pretty exciting.
So right now, are you guys more focused on the load board or like the fuel section or the factoring, or is it all at once? Like, well, what's your main focus?
Yeah, all at once. So our core product, the first product that we launched with was this load board aggregator, right? So slightly different from a load board in the sense that, when I was at Uber Freight, what we saw was that, well, okay, every single brokerage is going digital, which is smart. It gets them closer to their customers. That said, all that information is disconnected for the most part. So for a driver, you think about the core driver's experience, what they're doing is that they're just going to each app one by one by one. And back then, let's say 2018, there's maybe 8 apps, 9 apps, 10 apps that were around. Well, guess what? Now there's like 50, 60, 70 apps that you go through a driver's, they have folders now where they're just going through all the different apps to kind of go through each one by one. And that's kind of the core problem that we solved, which was that when I was at Uber Freight, we would talk to a driver and just say, like, how long does it take for you to find your next job? And if they don't have if they don't have like a direct to shipper relationship, a good contract, or kind of like they haven't established those relationships yet, and they're hitting the spot market, it take two plus hours a day to effectively go through all that information, try to process it, try to understand which was the bid on. Some of those information you still have to call on. So that's how we entered this industry, or entered the market, which was, okay, the industry itself is digitizing. It's becoming far easier for a driver to find their next job. Let's bring all that information to a single place so that they can take advantage of it, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing that we saw was that there's all this great innovation, but it's harder. It kind of made it harder for drivers to kind of just like really take advantage of all that. So that's kind of how we entered with this load board aggregator, such that drivers can just instantly see all the available loads that they could already see anyways. They could bid, they can book, they can kind of manage their business. As that business has grown, obviously now brokers are just coming to us. They're sending loads to us, just like any other load board would out there. And now we're just getting a far supply of demand on our platform, so that drivers can continue to find and book loads. Yeah.
So Dan, do you still take all those load boards and aggregate them into TruckSmarter?
Yeah. So what we would do is that, let's say a driver has 6 or 7, 8 different apps that they're working through. It still just takes time for them to kind of process all that information. And what we do is that we provide a service to drivers to kind of just see all that into a single place.
So you still do that. You still aggregate all the load boards How many load boards are there in total in the TruckSmarter app?
I think now we partner with over 250 brokers, right? So to me, that can be, some of them are coming through the drivers or the brokers load board specifically. I think as we've grown our carrier density and have been able to kind of connect drivers very quickly with demand, a lot of brokers now just come to us, right? And they just want to post loads. They kind of see us as another channel to acquire capacity. So now it's 250 plus. A lot of the original load boards that we've worked with, we're partnering with a lot of those brokers as well to kind of just streamline the information that's coming through and making sure that we can kind of just continue to innovate in the same direction.
And the load board is completely free, right?
Yes, the load board is completely free, and I think for us, it's like that's one of the ethos that we've had for the business, which was for a driver to just find their next job. We want to make it such that they don't have to. They can do that, right? Like we want to encourage that type of economy in this space. I think as we continue forward, obviously there's premium offerings that we're thinking through that able to provide, of which there might be some charges, but at least the core load board that'll be free.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, how do you guys make money? Like, what's your, is it right now? Are you guys just trying to grow and kind of giving the free product to get people more, I guess more on the load board? And then once, you guys reach a certain amount, you guys will decide to have like different versions of it.
Yeah, that kind of goes to your early question, right? Which is like, what are you guys focusing on? There's a lot of products that we're building. The way I kind of think about it is that for a driver, the first order problem is if they don't have a job, they got to find a job, right? So we've kind of built that load board to help acquire our customer base. We haven't spent a single cent on marketing. It's a high frequency, high intent action that a driver is always thinking about. And then we kind of use that as a wedge to then cross-sell into the other services that we have that are revenue generating, right? So the second order thing that a driver typically thinks about is like, if I move the job, well, now I got to get paid. It usually takes me 30, 45 days to get paid. Well, there's got to be a better option. Obviously, there's factoring businesses out there. That's kind of one of the bigger businesses that we have that through the load board, through the demand channel that we're getting through the load board, we can effectively help factor a lot of the loads for our drivers. And then we've also built a fuel business, which is, if you think about it, the third order thing that a driver does is, well, 40% of their costs go to fuel. How do you make that experience a little better, right? And so we built our own native solution to effectively help drivers get the best discounts and kind of keep all of that within the ecosystem.
So
nice.
So Dan, you raised a decent amount of money, and one of the investors, A16Z. Can you tell us a little more about the investing side, how you're able to raise money? Kind of, I know that from your past experiences at Uber Freight, DoorDash, and being in San Francisco, you're kind of well connected in the Silicon Valley world. Can you give us a little insight in how like the whole, I guess, Silicon Valley world, especially in the freight tech scene is? I know it's experienced a lot of growth in the last few years, especially due to the supply chain crisis and VC money flowing. So can you give us a little bit, I guess, insights into how that looks like and how you're able to raise money and build a product?
I think to me, when you are, if you're going down the route of venture capital, that's not the route for everybody, right? But if you are going down that route, I think it's important to size the prize. For freight, it comes with its own numbers, right? It's like one of the largest industries in the world. If you kind of look at the various parts of the industry, well, if you kind of win this industry through the shipper side, well, that's extremely tough, right? It's a very fragmented, it's a very high cost of sales, it's a long sales cycle, so it's going to be hard to kind of like collapse that portion of the industry. Brokers as well, you get a lot of players are building tech first brokerages. So there's quite a bit of data points to kind of see like how they've been growing over time and how they've been able to buffet a lot of the macro trends that we've been seeing. And I think for us, it's the way we've kind of entered the space is that, well, on the carrier side, 95% of carriers own less than 5 trucks, right? So it's incredibly distributed. A lot of these carriers are independent operators. They act like consumers because they make their own decisions. They don't have to go through a formal internal process to make those decisions. So for us, I think what got a lot of investors excited was that, hey, there's a lot being built both quote unquote within Silicon Valley and outside of Silicon Valley to kind of build tools for this space, right? Because obviously it's one of the most important industries, I believe, in the country. I think the way people have done it, I think that's what would ultimately attract, let's say, funding from the Silicon Valley ecosystem. And I think for us, when we built our core product, our load board aggregator, the way we've been able to acquire customers have been entirely free. And I think that's kind of was the big selling point, was that, well, every single day we wake up, there's thousands of more drivers that have signed up, right? And they're driving utility through the platform. They're constantly engaging on the platform. We have extremely high retention rates across the board. And I think that's what makes it attractive, such that if you kind of build point solutions across the board, which is like, oh, let me just build a finance tool, let me just build a fuel tool, the acquisition side of those businesses are very, very tough and costly and takes time. Whereas if you kind of already have this distribution channel, it makes it much easier to kind of cross onto all these different things. You got to provide value ultimately, but it makes it a lot easier to cross onto these different type of services and products.
Sure. I think one of the very difficult aspects of having like a load board is because, well, not only do you need truckers, you also need brokers, because without the two, then, you know, no one's going to be showing up. So, I mean, has that been a challenge for you guys? Like, where it's like, have you noticed that getting both parties involved is more difficult because people get used to, you know, like everyone uses DAT or TruckStop, and like, you know, TruckSmarter is another tool for it. So like,
yep.
How has that looked like for you guys? And I know it was kind of funny because we were at DAT and we met you at the booth, and you were right across from DAT, and it was just kind of, the placement was
strategically.
Yeah, it was definitely great placement. But can you tell us a little bit more about, like, I guess what you're facing from like the competition and like the challenges that you face while like building out a load board?
Yeah, I think for us, it's less looking at DAT. I think when we think about just partnering with brokers, it's making sure that we're satisfying their goals, right? And if we look at a lot of the partnerships that we have, and there's a lot of platforms out there, right? Like Parade and other platforms that kind of help digitize a lot of the mid to long tail brokers. Where they're seeing us outperform our competitors and our peers in this space is kind of that digital booking aspect, which is for our drivers, they're booking and bidding on the app. They're building that muscle. They're making it far easier for the counterparty, the brokers, to find that capacity, get them onboarded. We're building, and when we talk to brokers, it's like, well, we want to eliminate noise. We don't want random drivers just calling us, clogging up our sales lines, and just effectively increasing the cost to operate our business. So for us, we went through a whole effort to verify our carriers, get their MCDOT, get their certificate of authority, get their certificate of insurance, and just make sure that, okay, when we're sending you something, this is going to be a real carrier, and they're going to have all the right insurance requirements that you need so that you can just get moving. And I think that's kind of how we've been able to work very well with our partners, in the sense that when they plug in both, and we always say, like, look, we know that you don't want, there's a load of boards out there, you might have had a bad experience with them. Try us out. We're completely free to use. We're completely free to partner with. And overnight, there's just seeing a far different level of quality. And I think that's where we focus on, is that especially now, especially with the market where it is, there's a lot of noise, and there's also quite harmful noise in the space today. So where if you can actually just maintain your quality, there's an extraordinary difference for every single party that's involved in that transaction.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's crazy because you mentioned that there's so many different apps, like you're saying. I don't know if that's what you mean by a lot of noise, but as a driver, even when I used to drive, right, each broker is making you download different apps, or you're trying to use different apps to find different loads, so it's definitely getting to a point where I think there needs to be a platform, kind of like TruckSmarter, or any kind of platform where it kind of, especially for dispatchers, because now that I'm dispatching, I literally have to use 10 different load boards to go through, each one.
You should check out TruckSmarter. We help with that. And what we tell brokers, it's, look, it makes sense to digitize your operations, right? They're it makes a ton of sense. But I think where we come in is that for a driver, for a driver, when they're exploring the industry, you got to think about it in their shoes. Are they going to go to the 50th new app that just launched a month ago and sign up and go through the carrier onboarding? Or are they going to discover through a single app, learn about the different opportunities on those lanes, build that relationship, and then go from there, right? And our goal is to just connect the dots and just make it easier to acquire. But we want drivers to build a relationship, because we have a factoring business, we have a financing, we have all these other businesses that we're excited if a driver potentially churns from our load board, there's still opportunities for us to continue working with them, and we're okay with that, right? So I think for us, it's like our missions are effectively aligned in that sense with both the broker and the driver, and we're helping them get capacity faster and also help them onboard into the digital experiences that they've invested a ton of money building as well.
How are you guys dealing right now with like the loads being so cheap and brokers posting so many like cheap loads? Because I know the drivers be always, you know, not just the drivers, but even the dispatchers always complaining and screaming and stuff. So are you guys, I mean, how are you guys dealing with that? Is it kind of affecting like how many people log on or, you know, they use the load boards? Or because even right now, like right, if I go to like CH Robinson or any other board, like today, I literally tried to book like 10 different loads and they were gone within like a second, like literally within a second.
Yeah.
I couldn't even reach to my rep because usually the way I do is like I'll go on CH board, right? And I'll copy the number. I'll send it to my rep and I'll be like, hey, what's this pain or what can you do on it? And he'll literally respond like, what he's got in it or what they can do on it. But like right now, like today, or I guess in this market, it just, you don't even have the time to send it to them because people just be booking it within seconds, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge disparity between demand and supply today, right? It's like
I
obviously
don't know if I
demand is
glitched up.
going off. Oh, can you hear me?
You're good. Everything's good.
Cool. Yeah. So, you know, obviously demand has gone off a cliff. There's still quite a bit of supply in the market. And as a result, that's kind of why you're seeing the dynamic that you're seeing. I think when rates go low or even high, but especially when they go low, tools that help you find that next job become even more important, right? Because to your point, time is of the essence. If you're opening up one app, kind of like scribbling down the notes of like, okay, you know, this one is going for, you know, X dollar rate per mile. Do you really have time to go through the next 10 to kind of like compare and contrast? Right. Probably not, because that load's going to go off. And I think, you know, where our vision and where we see ourselves helping beyond just finding you a job is how you build a way for a driver to just fully understand their costs when they're booking that load, right? Like if you're going through the mountains, you're hauling 44,000 pounds or whatever it is, that's gonna, your fuel costs are gonna go high depending on the vehicle type, year of the vehicle, all these different things. And I think that's kind of how our business starts connecting. All the businesses within TruckSmarter start connecting together. Is that we're building a physical fuel network out there, such that we can actually point and direct you to get kind of the best discount to increase your actual profit margins when you're booking those loads. And I think one of the visions for us has always been, we don't want to just show you the line haul price. We want to show you what we think you're probably going to take home, given all the different characteristics and all the different using all the different products within our ecosystem, so that you can effectively continue to maintain your business, especially when the rates are going the way that they're going today.
So, Dan, out of the load board, the factoring business, and the fuel card, what would you say is like the core part of the industry, the whole core part of the business? And like, do you have to use TruckSmarter in order to get access to the fuel cards and the factoring company from like the load board side?
Yeah, so for us, it's actually not even a fuel card. We have a off-network fuel program. So when we looked at the fuel space, knowing that this is kind of, you know, this is the top expense that drivers incur, we just kind of looked at it like, what do drivers actually care about, right? So like the core of the company are owners and drivers, right? It's okay, that's who we're working for. Okay, what do they actually care about? Well, they want big discount, right? They want to be able to save as much as they possibly can when they're on the road, so that they can manage their costs. And when we saw the fuel card space, you know, there's a lot of different programs out there, both within the incumbents and obviously Visa has helped make it easier for companies to kind of build fleet cards on the Visa network. But all those different programs assess pretty meaningful merchant processing fees, right? And that kind of cuts into the amount of discount that you can give to this independent owner operator. So what we actually did is that we've partnered directly with TruckSmarter. We put tablets in their stores and are effectively settling via ACH and through bank deposits, so that we can kind of avoid those fees and effectively give discounts up to 60, 70, 80, 90 cents on average to the driver. So that's kind of the... Go for it.
Are you guys signed up with any of the big truck stops like Pilot, Flying J, TA, or any of those?
So we haven't partnered with any of those big chains. And I think for us, it's like a big part of our ethos is kind of the independent owner operator, right? And there's obviously a lot of great fuel stops within the country that are also independently owned. And I think for us, they give great service. They have great discount. They have great discounts that we could pass through, and that's kind of where our focus is today.
Okay.
Dan, is freight tech sexy in SF right now? Like, I feel like there's been, I know I brought this up earlier, but there's like a lot of companies have received like investments from the freight tech side in Silicon Valley. Has the community evolved in the last few years? How's that looking?
I don't know if I can speak for whether freight tech is sexy. I'm obviously biased. I think it's sexy, and even if it's not, I think it's an important problem, right? And I think like out of the various hype cycles within the space, I think just traditional investing ethos is what are the most important problems that we could use capital to build a phenomenal business on, but then actually radically improve the lives of the folks within that ecosystem. And I think for us, it's like freight is easily has been one of the greatest levers of innovation in our time, right? Just moving things from point A to point B. We would not be where we are, being able to sit in these buildings or whatever it is, right, without that. Yeah. And I think just like the overall importance of that specifically is huge to talk about and huge to think about if you can build a sustainable business, but then also B, help use technology and capital to kind of bring innovation to the space. So I think there's always these hype cycles that go up and down, but I think there's always the constant, which is like, how can we change the world with the capital that we can allocate to do that?
Definitely. Yeah, it seems like it's changing a lot, and then definitely a lot of like technology companies getting involved, and it almost seems like like every broker has their own load board now. Like not everyone uses like DAT anymore because like even like you said, right? It's better to have somebody that's verified that has like a trucking company that, hey, we know who this MC is. Like for example, like C.H. Robinson, you can only work with them, if you go through the verification process. Like you send them your insurance, they have their own process of checking instead of posting on DAT or posting on a different load board and getting like a million phone calls from carriers that they can't even work with them. So it's interesting to see, like, because I feel like there's so much more demand into like all this technology stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we're focused on, right? It's if you're finding a load through TruckSmarter, the first thing we make you do is get set up with the other with the broker themselves through the technology that they've built, whether it's like an in-app carrier packet that they then download and then have to fill out.
Yeah.
But our goal is to make them find that load even faster, right? Which as there's more and more apps in the space, makes it harder to do.
So Dan, like most load boards have seen an increase in like double brokering and fraud related activities. Yep. How has like TruckSmarter been able to, I guess, like work on eliminating that? I'm not sure. Is there like a way that you could be, 100% clear of that? Because I feel like no one is. No one is. So
safe.
No one is safe. Exactly.
Sorry. If we're making that promise, we're gonna be. Go for it.
We just got screwed like $2,700 by a fake broker. So no one is safe, not even us.
Yeah, and I think it's like, there's no way we can ever promise that because we'll be called out on it within a few weeks, right? And I think for us, it's how do we make sure that we just maintain a super high bar for entry within the space? And I think that's kind of been the issue with some of the other options out there. It's, kind of anybody can post, anybody can kind of sign up. I think for us, the way we verify carriers is quite manual. It's a cost for us, right? And I think for us, it's a cost that we're willing to incur to maintain the quality of the space. And it's not just the carrier side; it's also the broker, right? Who's posting, which is very important. And for us, there's no way for you today to sign up as a broker. We're completely free to use, so you can't even pay us. But there's no way for you today to just self-serve sign up and start posting loads. You can't do that on TruckSmarter, right? Every single time we get a load into our system, we've had a full-blown conversation with you. We've kind of made sure, and we've done the integrations through technology first, right? Which already kind of just adds another layer of just, okay, like there's a bit more friction for them to kind of build those integrations such that it's easy for us to pull that information in onto our board. So I think just how we've been able to just to kind of just maintain the quality. And I think for us, like when we think about kind of how do you eliminate fraud within the space, to me, it's hard to say, we don't want to be the arbiter of, okay, this is fraudulent, this is not fraudulent. What we want to do is kind of inform our drivers and say, well, if you're booking a load, hey, heads up, here's a flag that we just saw the same exact load, the same amount of pounds, like the same amount of time to post, whatever it is, within the same lane, right? So kind of educate the customers and say like, hey, this might be suspicious, heads up, right? And I think those are kind of the tools that we're thinking about building to just make sure to give the driver the most informed decision when they're going about their business.
So if someone books, let's just say, a load from TruckSmarter, and for whatever reason it happens to be from like a fraudulent carrier or broker, just like Bob got screwed for $2,700 last week, RTS isn't paying him that money. Would TruckSmarter take that cost and like pay the trucking company in that situation? Because if it was on the TruckSmarter load board, just
Well, yeah, for us, we're just providing a service, right? So, I mean, if like any load board out there is like backing every single dollar that's going through their platform, it'd be a very short-lived business. Exactly. I think for us, is we can provide as much service as we can and just make the most informed decision and be extremely transparent about like, hey, this load looks a little sketchy. Okay. Like we just saw a very similar load posted 2 hours ago.
Well, let's just say TruckSmarter has the carrier approved or the broker approved in our system. So for factoring, it's approved and all that stuff. And like we could cut this out, Dan, if it doesn't have to be on the podcast. If like, but I'm just wondering, like, let's just say everything is good to go for factoring, and you book it, and then it turns out that someone, defrauded a different broker and took their identity fraud from, like, what would happen then?
Yeah, so if you're factoring with TruckSmarter and you're a carrier and like like you're a factoring customer, I mean that's a separate business, right? So for us, it wouldn't matter where they even book it from, if they're booking it for TruckSmarter or not. But if they're sending us a signed POD and we purchase it, we're taking that risk effectively, right? And we provide non-recourse factoring. So for us, we're probably going to do our homework and tell them, hey, this load does not look legit.
Sure.
And we probably wouldn't. We very likely wouldn't purchase it.
Okay.
But we do have a factoring business, and we'll go through those like standard operating procedures as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just a hot topic right now. There's so many scams going on in the industry. It's unbelievable. And just like Bob had it.
Yeah, and even like with RTS, right? So they kind of approved that broker, right? So even we looked it up, that broker was approved. But the way the scam was so evolved, where it's like they actually stole that broker's identity. So not only did they like steal the load from us, they stole that broker's identity. They faked the whole carrier packet. They just changed one email or whatever it was. It's getting so complicated where it's like it's insane. They're getting
and we have that, right? Yeah.
And the guy still called Walter back, and literally told him, "Welcome to the effing club." Like literally the scam.
So Bob, the reason I'm asking Dan is this, because it's like, imagine if you found that load on the RTS load board, and then you found out that someone posted an RTS load board. Then it's like a little bit like, well, I got it from your load board.
But RTS they have their own broker, right? So they're their own brokerage. What TruckSmarter is, I feel like they're more of like they just provide the service, kind of like DAT or TruckStop is.
Well, TruckSmarter is like RTS and DAT combined in a way. But so it's like, imagine finding the load on TruckSmarter's platform and then finding out that it was a defrauded broker, someone that stole an identity. So that's why it's a little bit trickier than you finding a load on DAT and then RTS denying it. That's the only reason I brought it up, because I feel like it's because of that. But
yeah, and I think it's a good point, right? It's like, obviously, our goal is to build the operating system for the owner, for the truck driver to manage their business. We're going to have a lot of products that talk to each other, and intentionally so. We want that, right? I think for us, obviously, like each product, each service is kind of in its own like silo. But I think to me, it's the cost to us is our brand and reputation. And that's what we're always going to try to uphold and preserve. It's all of a sudden, drivers who are factory through us, they're telling the world, hey, we're finding loads that are fake, and then the factoring service isn't factoring it for us. Like, there might not be a dollar cost, but there's going to be one, right? Because then people are going to hear about it, and then that's gonna dissuade them from working with us. So I think that's where the cost is, and I think by having it within the same platform, you're incentivizing yourself to make sure to maintain that quality, because you don't want to risk that brand and reputation hit, right? Whereas like there's a lot of services out there that just do one thing, and there can be like looseness on kind of like those type of parameters.
Yeah, and I think the industry is really in need of someone to kind of Like
The government.
well, no, I'm saying that the industry really needs someone to somewhat dethrone DAT because people have had really bad experiences in the last few years with I mean DAT as a platform. I mean, obviously everyone uses it. There's no broker that I know that doesn't use it. I was a broker for 6 years, so everyone uses it. But like, how are they not stopping all that fraud that's going on in their system? Like, they should be verifying more, and it's kind of it's been crazy lately. And I've gone on LinkedIn and I've seen like people are really bashing, they're really putting their opinions and out there about DAT. So I mean, you said it correctly, and Dan, you're obviously smaller at scale right now than DAT is. But if you don't take care of it, then people are going to just start, spreading negative rumors or negative opinions about the product. So, but I'm definitely rooting for you guys.
Yeah, and I think to us, it's like, it's hard to break a habit that you've spent 40 years building, right? And it's hard to kind of trust outside, new services out there. But we've been actually, chomping at their bits to some degree. I mean, if you actually look at some of the key lanes that we kind of track, whether that's Charlotte, Dallas, Phoenix, DAT may have some more loads versus TruckSmarter. But if you actually look at what actually matters, which is price, details, information that helps drivers make those decisions faster, we're like 60% more loads with that kind of information on those lanes than DAT, right? And I think that's kind of how we position ourselves. It's that you're going to find quality, and quality doesn't mean reduced quantity. It's going to mean that it might actually be higher than the other platforms. But the goal is to get you on your way and finding a load and moving as fast as possible, because time is everything, especially in a market like now. Going through all that noise is not going to help you get there.
Yeah.
And I think for us, that's kind of where we're focused on. It's like, how do you just make sure you have the highest quality load board on the market to effectively do that?
So right now, you guys don't have the app version, or do you guys have where you can use a desktop version too?
Yeah, so today, right now, it's mobile first, and that was kind of with our core customer base, the independent owner operators, small fleets in mind. That said, there's a lot of dispatchers that use us. There's a lot of like medium-sized fleets that kind of use us to find that information faster. So we are starting to tinker and start to kind of build out what a web version could possibly look at, and kind of make sure to extend the functionality to desktop as well.
Yeah, because I feel like for drivers, an app is so much better. I feel like when I was driving, right, I would always sit on your app, believe it or not, even before, like when I used to kind of post it on my Instagram, but I would sit on that app and I would sit on like a couple other ones. But now that I'm like a dispatcher working in the office, it's more of like everything on a desktop. So I think that's a good idea to get into a desktop version.
And it just gives us a lot more real estate to play with, right? It's like, how do you do multiple loads at once? How do you add tabs to see things faster? Like, there's just a lot less real estate. But I think for us, it's like, it's not a desktop for the load side. It's also like, how do you manage your business, right? And I think that's kind of why we think that real estate is extremely important. It's on the financial management side and the factoring side and all these different things. Like, how do you just build the all-in-one platform for drivers to effectively manage your business?
Have you guys ever thought about going and getting your own brokers and just becoming kind of, I guess, a version of like posting your own loads on there instead of other brokers' loads on there?
I came from Uber Freight, and I've seen what it takes to run a brokerage. I would say we probably would not want to do that anytime soon, or anytime in the future. I think for us, our focus is on the carriers, right? There's a whole set of surface area that we just haven't even touched when it comes to those like financial management, business management, insurance, trailer payments, leasing, connecting, finding jobs, whatever it is. So there's a lot more space there that we're pretty excited about going deeper on before even thinking about some of that stuff.
What do you think about Uber Freight? Is it actually going to revolutionize and change the whole industry, or do you think it's just going to start and fade away? Because there's a lot of people saying this is going to change the whole industry. Other people are like, nah, this is not going to work.
I think a lot of businesses, like any digital brokerage or any like industry similar to freight, where there are new entrants that are digitizing, you have to figure out how to do it sustainably, right? Like hiring tech and hiring engineers is, let me tell you, it's super expensive. And if you're in a low margin business, that catches up to you in an environment where funding is not as liquid, right? So when the funding dries up and the expectations for raising that next round of capital dries up or increases, and you have to hit a higher bar to raise that capital, well, now you got to figure out how to actually make it work with what you have. And I think that, not just Uber Freight, but I think a lot of businesses in the space, who've been in this industry and kind of seen the rise and the falls and the cyclical nature of this industry, they're much more, the players that have been in this space are much more ready to do it, right? And I think that's kind of what you're seeing with a lot of the more new entrants that have been digital first.
So,
yeah.
And on top of that, how do you think AI will change the industry?
I think the way we're looking, and we actually just had a hackathon 2 or maybe 3 weeks ago where we had everybody put away all the things that they were working on from a day-to-day basis and just build anything you want, right? Effectively, that is aligned with our mission. I'd say half of the projects used OpenAI, and
Wow.
they used GPT-4 to effectively, either just do things a lot more efficiently. I think that's kind of the core pieces, right? Which is like, I think it's going to be a long ways to go before an independent owner operator just completely trusts a machine to find their next job, right? It's like, I think you're getting into this business to be an entrepreneur, right? So you always kind of want to like just see what's out there and kind of like go through I think AI can help assist and help you get there faster. I think where I see a lot of the benefits, just like technology in general, it's like, how do you effectively factor loads at a much, much, much better cost? How do you, provide fuel at a much, much, much lower cost? How do you just like streamline all your operations so that you can give more back to the customer? And I think that's kind of like at least the first iteration, right? And we've been playing around. There's a lot of stuff that we kind of hack together to do that.
Okay.
So imagine if you created an AI, right? Say I'm based out of Charlotte, and I run a dedicated lane from out of Charlotte to Rochester, New York. It's like 700 miles, right? Or whatever it is. I think it's like, but basically, and I'm as a carrier and I go on your platform and I can select it, right? That lane. This is actually a really good idea. Maybe one day you could throw me a couple $1 million if you implement this. But but then basically you select it where it's like anything that's above, $250 a mile, automatically book it and send it to my company, my MC. Would that work or no?
I mean, you don't need AI.
So look,
you don't need AI to do that, right? We can kind of do that
though, because look, instead of me going through 10 different load boards and 10 different platforms, what if you had an AI that just did that, itself, and you're like, okay, this is a good load. It's selected for this date, and you could actually plug it in, and it does, just goes and refreshes it all for you.
And we actually do have some version of that, right? Which is like you can save a surge today, and effectively, any load board that has a lot of loads, the goal is how do you find the right loads at the shortest amount of time, right? And so you can do that today, where you can go from Charlotte to Rochester, anything above 250, and they'll show you how many, all the various loads, and we can alert you when we think about it. I think auto booking would be a little bit tough because, like, what if 3 people had the same request? Then we gotta figure out who to book it for.
That's
I
true.
think it's like,
so you got to be the first one to have it.
Like you gotta be the fastest tech.
Yeah, I think what we could do is tell you exactly like, hey, heads up, we got a really hot load here, right? And here's the fully loaded cost. Here's your take home pay, whatever it is. If you're at the ready, go for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we could. I think where AI could really help is like beyond just the line haul rate. And this is kind of what we were talking about before. Like, what are you actually taking home? Because that's what matters, right? It's what are you actually taking home, and how do we use technology to figure out just exactly how much you're going to take home by taking this load, and ideally just help you make your decisions faster, right? And I think that's where a lot of our efforts and focus is on. Is it's just how do you get to that next step even faster?
Yeah, I mean, you would know exactly how much you're taking home if I knew, okay, from Charlotte to Rochester, 50-mile radius, 700 miles, 250 a mile, it's whatever, $2,000 or whatever it is, exactly what your cost would be. So, I mean, it would be interesting. I feel like it's gonna get to that point where it's gonna be like an auto book, some stuff like that. But I guess it would depend with which broker you're set up with or not, So
yeah.
So
yeah.
Dan, I want to touch back on the venture capital investing side of things.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit like how the investors have, that you talk to, what kind of advice have they been giving you? How have they been like involved inside of the business? And kind of, I know like Andreessen Horowitz from A16Z, he's an investor, right?
Yeah. The firm's an
Yeah.
investor in TruckSmarter.
Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, like from that side? Because I don't know, like for me, it's kind of fascinating, just to hear from what you've experienced and what it is like on a weekly basis working with them.
Yeah, I think for us, we don't. From when I think about kind of partnering with VCs, especially tech VCs, right? It's the value really comes from obviously A, the capital, but then also B, it's seeing a lot of this being done many times, right? I think when you're building something, you kind of just have one data set. And you might be able to like bring forward previous experiences, and that certainly A will probably help, and B probably like help you raise capital by having that kind of experience. But I think from a VC perspective, it's that they're seeing that one data point spread across 50 different companies all at the same time with the market headwinds the way that they are, right? So there's a lot more there's just a completely different surface area of information that they can help distill and kind of give to you. I don't really think it's a weekly basis, right? I think a lot of times, we'll touch base every so often,
Sure,
and just kind of like go through strategic decisions, right? It's like, hey, at a high level, hey, how does the market reward top line revenue today, right? Like, is this kind of top line revenue, or what kind of top line revenue makes sense for continued investment over time? Like, what type of gross profit margin? What all these different things. It's like when you're in the dirt building quite a bit, you kind of don't have sight of those things, and I think that's where there's a lot of context as to like, hey, here's where you probably should focus on for the next few months, without sacrificing some of the core vision that we have. So I think that's kind of the key relationship. That differs if, I think for us, we have technology investors, and we do have a lot of investors that come from the freight space as well, but our biggest investors are technology investors. I think that's where a lot of the dialogue really centers around. Obviously there's other investors that we talk to that are like, oh, like, we have partners, we know a lot of the biggest truck stops in America. Okay, that's a different kind of conversation, right? Because like, that's okay. How do you help skip some of those steps to bring those networks onto our platform? So I think you gotta, when you're building out your cap table, you want to make sure you have a healthy balance of all kinds of investors that can kind of spike in different areas.
Sure. And would you be able to disclose any of those numbers that you talk to with your investors, like
from
like top line revenue, top line revenue, and then gross profit margins, like what you're more or less like looking at? You don't have to. This is just like, I'm just curious from
Yeah, I mean, can't share any. I mean, obviously can't share any specifics, but I think from our business. But I think like if you just look at the market, right? Like the next 12-month revenue multiple for SaaS companies over the last 18 months have gone from 40 to 12. Right? Why is that? Or 40 to 12? Well, why is that? Well, there's a important underlying, there's far more numbers down below revenue that are even more important, which is largely gross profit, right? And then operating profit, and then and EBIT profit. And I think for us, it's like, how does the market reward all those different baskets of dollars? And I think that's where investors provide a ton of value. That's what they make their money on, right? That's all their gold on. It's like, how do you return capital, and so I think that's where there's a lot of very interesting perspective, which is like, and I think it's a no-brainer. The focus over the last 18 months for every company in the tech space, and also like any company any publicly traded company, is, oh shoot, like there's a lot less demand. We gotta manage to gross profit, right? And we gotta make sure that we can increase our profit even if revenues have gone down year over year. I mean, we see that with the entire freight industry, right? It's like, the revenues go down, but the gross profit line stays the same, right? And that's how like businesses in the freight industry, who's been around for decades, they know this game. They played it multiple times. They know exactly how to do it. So I think for us, that's kind of like some of the information that we get as well. But I think it's also like, if you look at the market, you can kind of like assess that yourself too.
Sure. And what's like the long-term play? Can you give us like kind of like, I don't know, your 5-year plan right now for TruckSmarter, and what's the future?
Yeah, I think for us, it's like our vision has always been, our mission is how do you empower truck drivers' lives? Our vision is how do you build a platform such that they can do all of those different things, right? How do you find, I kind of always think about it from a capital perspective, which is how do they find capital, right? That's loads, that's finding new jobs. How do they access that capital faster? That's factoring, that's potentially other forms of payment in the future. How do you manage that capital? How do you spend more efficiently? How do you make sure you know what's coming in and out? How do you actually manage your costs? And there's a whole other set of things that we haven't even talked about that drivers do, right? And I think for us, it's like, how do you build that single platform so that it makes it even easier to kind of manage your business, and you don't have to think twice about it. I mean, so much of the way that owners are doing it today, it's pen paper. They're kind of like putting it together from all these different sources of information. How do you kind of flatten that experience so that you can just keep going? And I think for us, that's ultimately, when we think about empowering truck drivers' businesses, effectively that is their lives, because that their business, like that, they are the owner operators. That's the money that's coming to their families. So I think that's where we can have a lot of downstream impact as well. So I think for us, it's how do you win? How do you build the operating system for owners and truck drivers within this space?
You got to TruckSmarter. That's what you got to do. There comes the name. You got to be TruckSmarter.
It was a very simple name, right? So I was just like let's keep it simple, right? It's like there's ways to do this business, and kind of what we were talking about before, where it's like GAT and other players, they might have more loads, but are you effectively managing your time in the best way, right? How do you find loads faster? How do you find loads in a smarter way? And I think there's a premium that's assessed to doing it in a smart way versus just doing it the way that everybody else is doing it.
Sure. Honestly, me personally, I don't even use the AT that much. I feel like the people in my office, they do. But for me, I honestly, most of the time, I just sit on different load boards. Because like you said, you have to go through all this nonsense, and then it takes too much time.
And there's a lot of loads that are like double posted, triple posted. It's the same load.
Yeah, so by the time you call, by the time that load's already gone, and you're like, man, I wasted so much time. And it's so expensive too. Honestly, it's way too expensive for what it is. But yeah,
and that's why we look at loads with prices, right? Loads with actual information. Because if you're tracking to like how many loads does each load board have, it's quite easy to get a much higher number than what you actually have, right? And then it's like, how do you take away all that noise and just look at the quality? And I think that's where we're not even really the upstart in some of these lanes. We're beating, and we have more loads with prices with that high quality data that versus the other players within the space. And we're just going to continue growing that and having that continue to be the wedge for our business.
Nice. Dan, so what advice would you give to freight brokers, drivers from your standpoint? What should they do right now in this market?
I think to me, it's like, we focus a lot on the driver space. And the number one thing we always say is know your costs, right? And I think Bob, you've been in the space, so right? Like when you book a load, you know exactly how much I should be taking home. I mean, I don't think that knowledge is common.
We're not taking anything home. We're losing money as we're driving. We're literally losing money as drivers are driving.
So the thing is, you have so much expertise in the sense that exactly, hey, I if I'm going over the Appalachians or whatever it is, doesn't make sense for me to take a load of below a certain threshold, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it. Yeah.
I was going to say, or even I-76, a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know, but the toll there is like $300. So even if that load, it looks like it's paying $250 or whatever it is, by the time you pay the toll, you're losing money. So, yeah.
And I think to us, that's exactly what we're focused on, right? And that's kind of our message. It's the way I think about it is that freight is cyclical. There's ways to manage that curve such that it's not as spiky, right? Like, you save during the good times and you manage during the bad times. That's how you build a decades-long business, and that's how folks have seen this space across the board. And I think that's kind of and it's not new advice. It's just hard to do that. It's hard to have discipline and do it in that way. And I think that's kind of why we build the tools that we build to help folks do that.
So what you're saying, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Eventually, it's going to get better.
I think so.
I hope so.
I think the country certainly needs freight, and certainly needs drivers moving things from point A to point B. So I think that for us is that's always going to be the case. And how do you manage the cycle is going to be the most important.
So once the supply decreases, the demand will increase, Bob. So what you could do to help other truckers is just kind of close down for now.
Nice.
Joke.
Yeah. Give it a hot second, and then come back.
Believe it or not, I feel like a lot of people.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are parking their trucks. They're just waiting. It doesn't make any sense to drive at some points because you're like taking $1 a mile, so you're just $1.20, $1.30. So you're losing money as you're driving. Plus, like I was actually talking to a friend, and I didn't even understand this point, but he's like, even if you're running right and you're just breaking even, like say you have a driver and you're running and everything is good. He's covering your payments. He's covering your truck payment, your trailer payment, your insurance, but then you're not making any money. It's kind of the truck is a liability out there because there's so much things that can happen, right? So like if it's a bad driver or if he's not really doing what he's supposed to, then he's literally like it can affect your whole company, and you're just doing that for what for no reason. So it's a crazy time I feel like right now, and I feel like a lot of people are doing that where they're just parking and waiting what's going to happen in the next couple months. Oh. But yeah,
Bob, which markets right now are doing pretty good from like what you?
I posted it today. I posted it today on my Instagram. Go check it out.
I know. I saw the post.
Drop it in the channel.
Every market was trash.
Dan, did you see that one? Do you follow me on Instagram or no? I posted the funniest thing today ever.
I'll have to check. I don't go too much on social media anymore, but.
It was basically a map of the United States, and I was like, "This is the U.S. Freight market or current freight market," and it was like crap. Like each state had a crap thing or a garbage sign on it. You know? Dude, I got like 2,000 likes within like an hour. It was pretty crazy. So
yeah.
What'd you say, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's no. I'm just saying it's like. I mean, we look at we see a trend of the rates every single day, and it's like, there's not really that many areas of good rates, but I mean, it's an average, right? Like there's folks that are beating it, and there's folks that are not beating it, and it's like the folks that are beating it are like they're the folks that have been in the space. They know how to kind of play the game, and sure. I think that's like the key thing. It's like, the industry obviously is going through this reset period, but there's ways to make money. And there's ways to kind of go about it. And Bob, I'm sure you guys are doing well. So it's like, there's ways to do it. You just got to be savvy and kind of figure it out.
Yeah, we're resorting to memes to make money.
Right.
Yeah. There's less competition in the freight meme industry than there is in the trucking industry. So
exactly.
Speaking of that, like we just had a conversation within the company. It's like, oh, is it time to start thinking about TikTok and all these different things? And I'm like, oh man, okay. I got to figure out what this actually means and how we can grow a business here. But you got to get creative.
I'm not a fan of TikTok. I don't know. I think the user interface just kind of for me, whenever I go on there, it's like glitchy and it's just I don't know. I don't like the content on TikTok. I like Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I mostly spend my time on Twitter these days, and YouTube. But LinkedIn and Instagram just to post and kind of dip out.
Yeah, but see, because you're more from like that side, but for like drivers, I feel like TikTok is perfect. So I even heard other companies will advertise, on TikTok, and they do really, really well. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I always sit on TikTok and I just scroll. So, but I don't really go on LinkedIn or Twitter that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's surprisingly a lot of truck drivers on Twitter. I was kind of surprised by it. There's like a nice like community of them out there.
We saw quite a few at Matt's, right? That was super fun. Just meeting everybody in person then. So
definitely.
Awesome.
Well, Dan, how can people try out TruckSmarter? And if they need to reach anyone at TruckSmarter, what's the best way to reach them?
I think for us, if you're an owner, if you're a driver, download it, check it out. It's free to use, free to see exactly what we're talking about here. I think if you're looking to partner, just email me. I mean, there's no formalities here. Dan@trucksmarter.com. It's a free for all. Feel free to send in. I read everything, and happy to figure out a way to make it work if you're thinking about partnering.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan, for coming on.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily FreightCaviar podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more FreightCaviar content, go to FreightCaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.